We're talking to Mike from My Insurance Guy, and having just recently turned 65 myself, I have a lot of questions that Mike hopefully has a lot of answers. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well today, TD.
Mike DeVito talking with you. Again, I have known you for years, Mike, but I was 65, always seemed so far off, and now all of a sudden here the reality of it is, and I start getting things in the mail, a lot of stuff in the mail. Tell me about that. I had Blue Cross Blue Shield originally, but I got stuff from them, but I got stuff all these people. Hey, you're turning 65, you got to do this, you got to do that. Tell us about what do I got to do when I turn 65?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks for talking with me today. Basically, a lot of times people will get, when you turn 65, the federal government sells your information. Your privacy is...
Well, I was wondering how all these people had my name and address.
Yeah, they take it and they go, here's a list of all these folks that are turning 65. And all the different folks out there purchase that information. And then before you know it, your mailbox, your telephone, everything's full of this information that you're getting that you didn't realize you needed to get. So I'll sum it up in a nutshell. When a person turns, and there's a couple different situations where people go on Medicare, but we're going to talk about basically, I'll basically cover with you what somebody turning 65 like yourself would be looking to. And since you're considering this at this point, a lot of times when people turn 65, they're still working and they don't need insurance,
right?
Because they have it through their employer. So they just stay on their employer's plan. However, sometimes they're not working for an employer, or the employer plan isn't as good, or they're on their own individually, and they a lot of times will purchase a Medicare Supplement policy to supplement Medicare. But the different parts of Medicare, I like to call it alphabet soup. So there's like 4 major parts, and the 4 major parts are A for hospital. Not that A and hospital have any, but A is part A.
All right.
And then there's part B, like banana, so apple and banana. Part B is the medical, used to be called doctor, but medical. And then you have your supplement that fits in there. I like to use, it's the best one, it's called G, like good, or grape, since we're doing fruits and vegetables here. And then D for drug or date is the drug card. So those are the 4 parts of Medicare that a person wants to get when they're going to say, hey, I need to sign up for Medicare. I want to be able to go to the doctor, go to the hospital. If I get sick, something happens, I don't want to lose everything I've worked for my whole life, and I want to get better and return to work, family, kids, grandkids, whatever you're doing.
Right, now, when I turned 65, my understanding was I got Medicare now, so I don't need insurance. So I dropped, my employer was paying half of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Sure.
And I understand that I get one checkup per year, and I'm pretty healthy right now at 65. So
sure.
Do I need any supplement now? Why would I do a supplement now when I don't really, I'm dental and eye insurance? That always confuses me too.
Right. So Medicare is kind of like a patchwork quilt, okay? If we probably went back in a time machine and made it to today, we probably would make it a little different, okay? But it was invented in the 60s. I think it was LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson. A little old lady, you can look at her from AARP. She pushed for the legislation back then, and they passed the law back in the day. And he signed it into law, and it came out. And Medicare was never really designed to be 100%. It was kind of like, we'll add on more things later. And they got through what they could get through. But Part A was the hospital part, and Part B was the medical part. And the nice thing about Medicare was it was designed to help people when they turned older age, as our medical society advanced and technology advanced. And, this is in the 60s, so things were starting to get better as far as tech and healthcare, and not just I have a cold, or go home and take 2 cookies and call me in the morning, or I don't know,
I'd like to go to that doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what about the one where you're going to get dinged if you don't? So I signed up for A and B, and I was afraid I got to sign up for the one that you get penalized every year if you don't sign up. What is the deal on that?
That's D for drug.
Okay.
And you also get penalized for B if you don't sign up for it when you're supposed to. You actually have a penalty. So A and B, the 2 parts of Medicare that we're first talking about, those 2 cover 80%. Okay, so they pay 80% of your bill. And if the bill's $1,000, it's 80%. You owe $200, and not the end of the world. Now let's move the ante up.
I was just say 10,000, then all of a sudden
and now we'll
2,000.
we'll make it $100,000.
Yeah. Which is very realistic.
It is. Personal family history. Family member had a hysterectomy last year, almost $100,000. Morning, day surgery, and home at night, and $98,000.
Yeah, I had hernia surgery, same deal. I was like, about that much money.
Yeah, it's just insane, the prices. So in that case, you'd have to leave your car keys, so you owe $20,000, 20%. So rather than, I always joke with people, rather than every time you owe, you got $1 million bill or a $100,000 bill, and you don't leave your car keys and your house keys, with $1 million bill, it's $200,000, you buy a Medicare supplement. and that pays the 20% that Medicare doesn't. So Blue Cross and Blue Shield and other companies sell that, and the government came up and standardized those back in the 80s. So when I got into the business in the 80s, Medicare was 20 years old. And by then, Medicare had some issues. So they reformed it, and they said, we're going to have supplements that are standardized. A, B, G, also decided to letter them.
Again with the letters. Okay.
Right, again with the letters to confuse people. So, but our government likes letters, like IRS, CIA, FBI, right? So that's a thing, right? So Medicare, no different, right? Because it's a government, Frankenstein. So that said, the supplements came out, and they were really good. But the problem was there was no rhyme or reason to them. So when I got into the business, 20 years, Medicare's old at that time, the government got involved because there were little old people, which is now us, grandma and grandpa, whatever. They're buying, 5, 6 Medicare supplement policies to cover a need that they thought was important to them, and not realizing that they don't need 5 or 6 Medicare supplement policies. Yeah. And then little grandma is getting, all these nice men coming to the house and selling insurance to her, and they're, drinking coffee and eating cookies. So the government said, listen, this is ridiculous. She's paying $700-800 a month for a Medicare package of whatever. Let's standardize these. So from an insurance perspective, you're only allowed to buy one Medicare supplement policy. You don't do anything wrong. The person selling.
Well, that makes sense. I guess you don't need more than one, right?
Correct. And there's strict rules on replacement and things like that. But when you're purchasing a Medicare supplement policy, the supplement policy has to be one of these standardized plans. So the government came in and said, listen, insurance companies, you can still be here, and the insurance companies wanted to still be there, but you're going to have to follow some rules. We're going to have some ground rules here, kind of like a sporting event, okay? Not just get the guy with the football. Let's create a set of rules here, kind of like I used to coach football. You're big into sports, and you have a set of rules as well. Same thing with this. So
you're the Newt Rockney of insurance. Then.
There you go.
The forward pass.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of came into that way. But when you're looking at this stuff as far as purchasing things, there are some protections in place for you, but there's so many things, and it's very confusing. So if you're purchasing, like I always tell everybody, just get a traditional Medicare supplement, which is back from the 80s, standardized.
And then what are we paying? Now, not to interrupt you, because I thought when I turn 65, I get Medicare, I don't have to worry about insurance anymore. Yeah, right. I go to the hospital, I hand them my Medicare card, and I'm all covered with that.
Right.
But then I'm getting all these different offers in the mail seem to be slightly different. So how is that?
Right. So the more options you think, oh, this is great, and sometimes options can be a good thing, and sometimes they can be very confusing, right? What do I do? So
better to go with a name, like I always said, Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Yes. So we've been general agents with Blue Cross for 30 plus years. So a good name like a Blue Cross Blue Shield or a Mutual of Omaha, those are brands, but we'll take Blue Cross Blue Shield. Mm-hmm. So in our state of Illinois, they insure probably 80% of the populace. They're huge here. They actually are a mutual company, so they're owned by the policy owners, kind of like a credit union. Okay. And Blue Cross Blue Shield in the state of Illinois, hence Mutual of Omaha too, a mutual company. They're mutual companies, which means policy owners own them, like I said. So they're it's not like you're going to go in there and put your feet up on the desk at the president meeting, but you will get invited to go and vote on things with them. Have you ever done this? Probably not. I haven't, and I've been insured with them and working with them for years. But you can if you want to, and they're membership driven. So the concept behind it in a mutual company is that our members are what is first and foremost, and then you have people behind the scenes, administrative. But there's no Wall Street. There's no publicly traded stock. There's nobody to make rich. Overnight.
Board of directors.
Yeah, right. It's more basic. They do hire good talent and they pay them well, mm-hmm. and the president might make a good buck, at Blue Cross or whatever, but it's not the incentive of the stock publicly traded companies that you hear about on Wall Street all the time, or the scandals and stuff. It's typically not. So when it comes to Medicare, though, the two parts, the Part A and the Part B, that 80% is paid for by Uncle Sam. Part A is usually free if you have the 40 credits, 40 quarters paid in, 10 years into Social Security. They keep tabs, and when you log in or go on to the Social Security office when you turn 65, if you have the 10 years paid in, doesn't have to be consecutive. Part A, which is over $500 a month, is what they charge you for that. It's free to you. Part B, that part they're charging you about $185 a month.
Yeah, because I had to pay, $1,000 right up the front there. And I'm like, what's this deal here? I'm thinking I'm getting free now, and I'm paying $1,000 to the government for...
Right. So they're probably in their billing. So if you're getting Social Security benefits, they'll take it out. but sometimes if you're not collecting,
see, I'm
Social
not.
Security-
Okay, so.
right, if you're not collecting Social Security money yet, which a lot of times people
Which I'm sure, I turned 65. I don't plan on taking Social Security, till 68, 69, but I'm sure many of us will.
And that's kind of in this topic too. They have what they call SSNR, Social Security Normal Retirement Age. Okay, and Social Security Normal Retirement Age you would think would be the same as Medicare, which it used to be. It used to be 65. Then they changed it. They made it
67, right?
now it's 67, 68 for some people, turning 65 now, and they kind of moved the bar a little further out to get the money full retirement age. You could still currently right now collect, but you'd get a reduced amount.
Yeah.
So a lot of people choose to wait, especially if they're working still and they don't want to get a reduced amount. They wait a little longer, but they want the Medicare now because the world tells them they need it.
Right.
They have to have it.
That's me.
Because
So, yeah.
so you get Medicare, and there's nothing for them to take out of a check that you're getting from the government, so they bill you. So they usually will send you a quarterly bill, like, hey, every 3 months here. And initially, they work at their level, so the first time you get a bill, it might be 5 months of a bill, because they catch up you to them.
Right. Okay.
Not
So that's
like-
why I got the big one early there.
Correct,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
That's why you got whacked with the big one. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I know, talking about this with people all the time, kind of usually can get a sense of what their background is, without even delving into much.
So then they tell me now it's going to be about $120 a month.
Yeah, right. Well, right now,
So I was wrong thinking that I get my Medicare card and everything's covered.
Right.
You're still going to have to.
So when you get Part A free, in your case, B, it's currently $185
Okay.
a month. Okay, and that covers the doctors and all the people working in the building. Okay, so that medical part. So now if you stopped there and you said, I don't want any insurance guy visiting me, I don't want to buy any insurance from Blue Cross, I don't want what the government's got for me, you got 80%. Okay, so it's not like you're gonna roll
wiped
out
out. Yeah.
right. But people, a lot of times, they want to keep their car, they want to keep their house. They also, when they go to a doctor today, doctors and hospitals want to get paid. So a lot of times what will end up happening is the doctor and the hospital won't see you if you just have Medicare, because they want to know, well, who's going to pay the other 20%. And now you can either say, well, here I have $5,000, see me. And then maybe that works, but most people don't go, here I have $5,000, see me. The doctor or the gatekeeper will say to you on the phone, do you have a Medicare Supplement policy? And that's where Blue Cross comes in.
See, I just had that happen. I was supposed to get my yearly checkup, and after I turned the age 65, and they said, well, they called me and said, we need to know how you're going to pay for this. And I had just dropped my Blue Cross, and I go, I have Medicare.
Right.
And they were like, well, no, you have to have.
Right.
And they canceled my appointment. And
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on?
Right. And it used to be, there's been changes over the last 10, 15 years in our healthcare system, good or bad. But the bad part is that. And there used to be a cash payer situation where, it wasn't a big deal, it was normal. But today they're all scared. Like, there's also these large hospital groups and medical groups, and you'll get somebody on the phone, and it's not the doctor. It's somebody they're paying to answer the phones. And some of them are trained better than others, but some of them are made to, look, if this person doesn't have this, and this, hang up, cancel their appointment.
Right.
And you're like, well, what about, so you might wonder then, you think to yourself,
Well, the one profession you would think that we might want to waive that
Correct.
would be the medical field.
right.
Yeah.
And so the terminology that they'll use a lot of times is, well, there's elective, right? You're calling up the doctor, you want to be seen, you want to establish yourself, you want to continue to go to your doctor. And then there's emergency. Now, my wife was an emergency room nurse for years, and they don't turn anyone away. So the emergency room, like if you go in there and you've got a cold, the flu, you're having a heart attack, they see everyone. They don't care. They don't go, where are you from? What planet are you from? They take care of you. But you don't want to go to the emergency room. You just want to go to a regular doctor. I went today and got a blood test and, so forth, and going for my physical next week. But he wants me to go ahead and get the results so that when he's sitting there next week, he can lecture me on eating too many, beef combos or hot dogs, or whatever, all that stuff, way off the donuts, DeVito, but that kind of stuff. But that's why he wants that ahead of time so that he can, otherwise when I have the visit with him and then I do the blood work that day and then I'm gone and it comes to me, it's like, I'm gone. He can't lecture me, now he's got it ahead of time and he's like, okay, let's talk about this test that you just had.
Now, if we're going to wrap up this segment, I was wondering now, because my wife and she turned 65 before I did, and she did not take any dental or vision insurance, because she said, I'll just pay for it, because what is it, a couple $100 in there?
Sure.
So do we really need that, Mike? Do we have
I'm on the fence on that. I have a lot of people, I talk them out of dental and vision.
Okay.
So I'm wearing glasses, right? I got a couple pairs. That I am going to go to the dentist, that kind of stuff. But sometimes insurance you don't insure everything, and that's coming from my insurance guy, right? An insurance agent. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
This is being recorded. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need to insure everything.
Exactly. So, you have to look at, I call it trading dollars. So if you're going to give me $1,000 and I'm going to make you beg and scream to get back $1,500, and you have to jump through all these hoops, sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And dental insurance is kind of one of those things. It's a forced budget plan for dental. That's fine. But
then you get this massive list of what's covered and what's not covered.
Exactly.
And that's so you can.
Well, in the old days, Stan Schwartz, one of my old agent friends, and Walt Gallis always would tell me, read the exclusions. When you buy something, don't read what's covered, read what's not covered. Okay. And usually what's not covered is real tiny and 3 pages long. Okay. And that's kind of how dental insurance is.
Yeah.
And growing, because they, this and this, we're not going to pay for this and that. So if you're like, I have employees that work with me and stuff like that. And one of the check boxes when you come to work is like, do I have dental? Do I have medical? So we provide it for everybody because it's kind of, it's like if I'm a restaurant and I have a bunch of, waiters and waitresses and they're all hungry, they're eating the food from the patrons. I believe in, making sure at an insurance agency, everybody should be full insured, well insured.
But we can't foresee dental problems and vision problems as we get older.
No.
So, I mean.
So what you can do is, there is a dental plan. We do sell it. Blue Cross sells it. A couple other companies. I only work with top line companies. Dental will range about $30 to $60 a month for a plan, and it'll cover a couple cleanings a year, and it'll pay for basic and major, but it's got limits on it, caps, and I don't know how to sound.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
Yes,
caps.
yes.
So they cap you out at $1,000, $1,500. About the best one we have goes up to $5,000. Okay, so it sounds like a lot, but you also though have to remember, like the dentist that is in. A lot of dentists are still old school. They're like, yeah, we'll take your insurance, we'll take any money from anybody that wants to send us money, but we're not in the plan. Okay, so that means they're out of network. So
okay.
You get.
Oh, that's a term, out of network. Okay.
Correct. So I always like to say to people, the dentist says they take everything. Well, yeah, they'll take anybody that's going to give money, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be in full. So if the insurance company that you got your teeth cleaned, and it's about $200 to clean your teeth, give or take. And the insurance company throws $100 at the dentist. Well, the dentist isn't going to, okay, that's great. They're going to hit you up at the exit for, give me a Visa and MasterCard or the other $100 cash. And that's what they want, because they want their money for their service. Okay. So that's kind of how that works. But kind of super step back on when we talked about Part A and Part B, and you have your 20% insurance for doctor and hospital, the big enchilada that I always tell everybody is to worry about is when you are sick. That's where people get devastated financially.
Right.
The largest cause of bankruptcy in this country, everybody thinks it's some guy with a lot of credit cards, overspending, he can't control himself at, or man or woman at a store. And it's medical. It's healthcare. That's the largest reason that people lose their home and their livelihood and they go bankrupt.
Well, I'm sure it's probably another conversation, but we hear the term catastrophic insurance.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Anticipating the worst, right?
Right, exactly. And that's why
that
I
sounds
recommend.
expensive though, Mike.
It's really not. It's not in the long run. I'd rather people laser focus on Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, and then get a Plan G Medicare Supplement from like a Blue Cross. That'll run you about $150 a month. Okay. And then a drug card, Part D, and that'll be anywhere from free, believe it or not, to like $20, $30 a month. So I usually tell everybody today in the Chicagoland and in the Illinois area, and most parts of the country for that matter, it will cost you when you're on Medicare to have a really nice program between the government and your private insurance, about $300 to $330 a month. And then that will cover you wonderfully. That's the best insurance you'll ever own. And basically you'll only get, when you get sick, and you have the wheels fall off the track and all these horrible things happen, or even if they don't, the maximum that you would owe in that scenario is $257 this year. That's it. So you could go to the doctor, the hospital, and even the pharmacy, and you're very low out of pocket costs. And that way you can remain, you don't have to sit up nights worried about, okay, I've got 20%. Mike told me the car's going to go, the house is going to go every time I get sick. That way you don't have to worry about that. And
but now realistically, I can't afford $330 a month for insurance.
Right.
That's more than I was paying before.
Right.
Because my employer was covering half of it.
Right. So right now,
but that would give you the peace of mind, and like you said,
it will. So like right now, you pay $185 a month. Okay, that's just what the government has. Right. And then if you're adding on about another $150, that's the supplement that pays that 20%. So then you don't have to worry about owing all this money when you do get sick.
Right.
And then pay out of pocket yourself the dental and the vision. Vision is a subjective term. So Medicare has and does not and is never covered, dental basically, but Medicare does cover vision, like cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration, tumors. God forbid you need, $500,000.
Well, I was reading my art magazine, and I read that majority of us are going to get cataracts. So
right.
that's
Medicare
so
all day long when you sit at the eye doctor and they're all there with the cataract glasses on.
Yeah.
All that's paid by Medicare. You don't have to worry. So Medicare and the supplement would pay all of that. You wouldn't need a vision plan because it's in there. What vision doesn't pay for is this stuff. Okay, and they don't pay for reading glasses, driving glasses, that kind of thing. So they do not. For Medicare doesn't. So that's why some people buy. They're about $10 a month a vision plan, and it gives them an allowance to go buy glasses and stuff if they want that. Again, some things I think you just take care of yourself.
Right.
Dental and vision is one of them that I am in the camp of. But really laser focus on what worries me.
No pun intended. Laser focus.
Exactly. What really worries me about, like in your situation too, is if you get sick, if you have, even a kidney stone and you're $100,000, now you're going to owe $20,000.
But can I roll the dice until something goes wrong with me? And
You
then
can all roll the dice. I mean, here in America, there was a law where you had to buy health insurance, and there's still a law you have to buy health insurance, but the penalty is zero. Okay, there was a penalty.
Yeah.
They were going to tax us and all this stuff, and that never materialized. So the dice you roll today, it's not like you get pulled over by Medicare police and they write you a ticket. The only thing is that you run the risk personally when you only have Medicare A and B that you're going to owe this 20%. So if you want to solve that equation, you buy a supplement, and they're, like I said, about $150 a month.
Okay.
And I recommend that doesn't let you. It's traditional Medicare, so you've got to be sure you buy. It's like a letter G. It's called. Very, very important. But beyond that, then that way you can go pretty much anywhere you want, to any doctor and hospital in the United States.
And that's a big thing too, I know, because people want to go to their own doctor, or they tell you have to go to Aurora here after you go to see a doctor.
The nice thing about doing Medicare and a Medicare supplement with traditional Medicare, okay, is there are about 98% of all the doctors and hospitals in the United States are in Medicare. So I usually joke, like, the 2% that are not are either on their way to prison or, don't have a license. So
You don't want to go there.
you don't want to go there anyways, exactly. So, but let's say, God forbid, you end up and you have a heart attack and you have to go to Northwestern, and they, fix you all up, and a month later, you remade the TV show from the 70s, The $6 Million Man. Okay, so there's two of you. One of you, exactly. And I think they had the $8 million woman. She came along a year later.
Or what her talents were, yeah.
Right. And women are a little more expensive, so I think she was $8 million. He was only $6 million. But let's revise it and reboot the show to now. Let's say it's $10 million today, and you've got Medicare. You currently, with just A and B, you would owe $2 million.
Yeah.
Okay. So instead of owing $2 million or going game over, you bought the supplement for $150, and it pays that for you, and you don't have to worry. And then all the follow-up visits, I think he had to go in for tune-ups every now and then for his bionic legs and all that. So,
So then the bills don't go away either. That's not going to go away either. So
what's that?
The bills that you would owe would continue to. It's not like they're going to be wiped out.
No. So if you have the supplement, it's literally free and clear. I literally have a client right now. His wife just got out of the hospital. She was in for several months, millions of dollars. And they owe $257.
Really?
Yeah.
It's amazing how that can add up. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets costly real quick in no time. Plus, you get the appointments. So I always have to say to people like this, like, emergency, not a big deal. But non-emergency, you can't even get an appointment because you don't answer the questions the way they want you to on the phone.
Right. So they cancel my appointment. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the sad state of affairs in current environment, and has been this way since I've been doing this 35 years. So the reality of the matter, though, is, you kind of have to pay to play in the sense and get better access. That's a better way to do it. Now, obviously, if somebody has low income or they have, financial difficulty, we have another system to help them with that. It's called dual eligibility.
Okay.
And we'll leave that for another segment or whatever. But dual eligibility is kind of Medicaid and Medicare come together, and they help them. So we got a great system in our country for people below the safety net, okay, or in the safety net. We have a terrible system for people not in the safety net and above, because if they're looking at this, and then also if a person is looking at this and they say, "Hey, I like what you're saying is I'm just going to wait,"
roll the dice.
Roll the dice, which is an option. You do run the risk of that. So I always try to encourage people to, not that I'm trying to get $150 out of you, but to pay the extra money, get the better access, be able to make the appointments, go see the doctors, especially when I have someone call me and they say, "Look, I just got diagnosed with, stage, 3 prostate cancer or whatever. And it's a much better story outcome. Yeah. Now they have the supplement. Now they have Medicare. Now they can go anywhere they want, and they just have to get an appointment. But it's not, we don't take that. So that I don't get that back. So, everything so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's good. It's good to know. Well, again, this is a great thing to talk to you about this because, again, I am experiencing this right now, and it's I was under the misconception that, once I got the Medicare, I'm covered, baby. So I don't have to worry about any supplemental insurance. But so come and see you, Mike DeVito. And,
you can.
My insurance guy, and there's no pressure with you, right? You don't really care one way or the other. You just want what's best for people.
Absolutely. Like. A lot of times the majority of all my clients, they're all referral based. I work with a lot of retirees from the different municipalities, the city of Chicago, state of Illinois, Cook County, Hoffman Estates, go through the list of areas, Sycamore, DeKalb, so forth. And I also work with different organizations. I insure a bunch of dentists. Speaking of dentists, they buy health insurance. They don't buy a lot of dental insurance, but they buy health insurance, and they need it for their folks and stuff like that. So, but yeah, everybody. I have people from they own large sport teams to all the way down to the guy sleeping on the floor at the stadium when the game's over. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about Medicare is everybody on Medicare, it's all the same. So, and they all have the same problems and questions. Every question you've asked me is the same question that the guy will ask me that owns the football team or baseball team or basketball team, or the guy that's sweeping the floor, right? And everybody in between. Yeah, because it's the same kind of system. But the most important thing is to make sure that, and I can't stress this enough, that when the person does get Medicare, they get traditional Medicare, A and B, like you did, and they get apple and banana, and they get a supplement, not anything called Advantage, just a supplement. It's like a Plan G or a Plan F. Those are the ones you want. Plan G for most people today that are turning 65 is the one they're looking for. And then a drug plan, Part D. They should get that.
Now, is that only if you're taking medication now? Because, for instance, I'm lucky enough not to be taking
So even if you're not, it's kind of like when we do car insurance in our agency, and the guy says, I'm a perfect driving record. I don't want to buy car insurance. Now it's a law. You got to buy car insurance if you're going to drive, right? And driving is arguably it's a privilege, not a right. Arguably healthcare is more of become a right, not a privilege, right? And that's what the argument is. So it's a little different animal. My sons will say to me, being in the auto and home insurance, you don't have to drive. You don't have to. It's nice to have a car. You don't have to live in a house. You can rent something or whatever. But you do need healthcare. So the argument when we do insurance is, and this is the way they devised the system in our country back after World War II, is basically is healthcare a right or is healthcare a privilege? Is health insurance healthcare, and is it a privilege? So you can't get into C and get healthcare because you don't have the right health insurance. So then in effect, you're being denied healthcare. So that's the argument. So so in order to get the magic golden key to get in, or the golden ticket like in Willy Wonka, you've got to get the supplement to help you. And so that's kind of what ends up happening here. At least this is the current game. So I always tell everybody I'm a big Star Trek fan. So I remember, Bones on Star Trek. Every time somebody would get hurt, they'd walk down the hallway and then he'd wave like that. Jim. Yeah, Jim, and they'd wave the wand over you, There's a one where he I think it's Chekhov gets hurt or something, and they go back in time or something and they're in the United States, and they're got to get whales or something. Anyways, and when they go to get him, Chekhov falls off the ship and gets hurt. So they have to go save Chekhov. So they're about to drill holes in Chekhov's head, because my wife will appreciate this, because that's how you relieve the pressure from the brain, the skull. You drill holes, and and so Bones goes in and he goes, "My gosh, barbaric! What is this? The Middle Ages? Drill a hole in his head? Are you crazy?" So instead, he grabs them, and then they push everybody aside. He waves the wand over him, and then everything's good. And then they grab them and they leave, they flee, and everybody in the medical operating room is like, what just happened, And we hope we can get there. Hopefully we're going to get there.
That would be nice.
We
can all live long and prosper.
Exactly. So let me try that. All right. But so when we're looking at this stuff, though, from my attitude of, I'm a big Star Trek fan, when people say to me, you must love this. I always say I like Star Trek, and so if I were creating things, I'd be more like Star Trek, where I don't remember when the guy got sick, or I don't remember Chekhov. They asked him for his Blue Cross or his insurance that he had Medicare, and also on the show, I don't remember anybody when they went to Bones down the hall. He said, I don't take this coverage. We're not going to, or it costs them literally, his everything. They just took care of the guy, got him better, and got him back to work, and then he was back in the next scene. Everybody's smiling again, So that's kind of my thought on the world. But unfortunately, we don't live in Star Trek. I always tell everybody we live on Earth and in the United States, and that's
as you would say, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right? So that's a Star Trek drop in. And,
yes, exactly.
But that's true, and that's what you're all about, right? Just the needs of the many.
Just helping people out, explaining how it works. I always say we have the smartest clients in the world because we always like to educate people, and then you make a decision. So I always say, and my wife always said this: we're not really like sales people. We're more of an educator on it and explain. And then if something makes sense, feel free. We're more than happy to work with the person. But two things, and then I'll stop talking. We don't cost anything, so I don't charge any fees. Some agents charge fees for consultations and stuff. I do that.
Okay.
So, and then also the insurance companies pay us. So when you buy a product from us, an insurance company pays us a fee to take care of you. Whether you have me or not, you still have an agent signing you up because it's kind of like a rule. All right. So if you're like, I'm going to get rid of that, I'm going to take all that guy's info and I'm going to call him up directly and I'm going to get a better deal. It's the same price. I'm not any more money. I give you all the discounts they give you.
Yeah, so you're not tacking on
no extra fees or anything.
So,
nothing.
Okay.
Zero. In fact, people will call me sometimes and they're like, I call the company and I talk to somebody else and they're like, more than you. How is that? You said everything. And I said, well, they didn't put the discount in. Like they didn't ask you questions about your family and stuff like that. There are discounts you get for certain insurances.
Sure.
So I ask the questions. Sometimes it'll seem like I'm grilling somebody, but there's a reason behind it, like, deal with
And you know what questions to ask, right?
Correct. Yeah. And then that way they get those discounts. So if you had Blue Cross, you get another 2% discount. So I plug that in. But if a person didn't ask you, you're not getting the 2% on top of the 10%. So now you're getting, you're paying 12% more when you don't need to. So those are some of the things that, by talking with a client, by finding out a little bit about them, and then working with them. We also do an annual review. Every year in October, open enrollment is for Medicare. And I always kind of use that time and tell everybody, kind of give me a call, make an appointment. We'll talk about if you need to do anything. You don't always have to. We go several years and nobody has to do anything, but we should always have an annual checkup once a year. And then if you need to just know, like the deductible changed or the premium is going to be a little different, or sometimes it actually goes down. This year it went up, but sometimes
we talk to our friends from Healthcare Services, and they're always talking about that things are constantly changing.
They
right?
are,
and possibly to your advantage, right? So
they are, yes. And I had a client right now. The lady was 85. She had a Blue Cross Blue Shield supplement from years ago. Same supplement I sold her, but it's a newer series. It's kind of ticks you off a little when you think about it, but it's like the cable company. You bought the cable, it was $50, it sounded great, and before you know it, you're looking like $200 a month. What happened? Then you call them on the phone, and 8 hours later, you're back.
Well, we'll be there between 8 and noon, or between 1 and 5. Sure, you will.
Right. Well, and then you call them and all this stuff, and you try to get that bill down, and from 200 back to 50, and before you know it, you've got it's $60. It's not 200. It was not 50. It went up a little, but you're like, well, why didn't you offer that to me? And they say, well, you have to ask. So it's kind of like what some of these companies do too. They don't always volunteer it. So that's why we always say, have an annual review. Kind of like when you go to the doctor, they want you to see you once a year. Mechanic too would be a good idea to get your car checked out, the maintenance. And then if there's something going on, you want to find a good agent, a good mechanic, a good doctor that you're comfortable with. And whether that's me or somebody else, that's fine. I mean, we have thousands of clients. I can't serve everyone. There are 11,000 people a day in the United States that go on Medicare. There are 13 million people that live in Illinois. Several million. There's 60
for now, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that could go either way, right? But when you're looking at the amount of people on Medicare, there are 66 million Americans on Medicare in the United States. It's the largest growing segment of healthcare.
Well, I'm at the end of the baby boom. I was born in 1960, so
Sure.
I'm right at the end of the baby boomer era, and I know that it's just going to keep coming, right? We're just going to keep going.
Millennials are just as big of a generation now.
Oh, I heard that. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a couple books I'm into demography, but like you count people, your movement of people, you kind of figure that from there. But demography states that with one thing that we have in our country is we have immigration, where some countries they don't have any immigration. We have immigration. We also have new births and people, obviously. But with that though, the millennial generation is as big with immigration as the baby boomers almost. So it's growing also. So They might have not all been born here in the United States initially, but a lot of people moving here and stuff like that over the years, over the decades, we're getting a larger millennial population. So
I heard a
so
great
it's
thing
not
to wrap things up, and that's that
Sure.
they used to say that America was a melting pot,
Yeah.
but I heard now it's like a tossed salad.
Yeah.
So everything is retaining your original shape, but
Right.
we're all in it together. you
Yeah,
know? So I think
absolutely.
that's a great way to look at it.
Absolutely.
Instead of melting down to all conform, we retain our individualism, but yet we're all Americans. you know?
Absolutely,
So
it's a good.
I was like
point.
that. So
Absolutely, and the nice thing about Medicare is, for good or for bad, and the history of it and all that, the intention of it is to make sure that in our society, you always like the quote: you take care of, you judge a society of how you take care of your weakest people, your youngest people, your oldest people that need help. That's the society I want to live in. I think everybody wants to live in that kind of society.
what's the one? Man never stands so tall as when he reaches down to help a child.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
like that stuff.
So
So,
it's-
again, you don't have a dog in the race, so and it's not going to cost you anything to call my insurance guy.
Not at all.
And say get a little rundown, a little checkup there.
Absolutely. So when we have all the bells and whistles, you can make an appointment online. You can call us up, old school, whatever you want. A lot of our calls, we do phone appointments.
Okay.
We'll do FaceTime. We'll do video chat. They can come in and see me.
Well, this has been very informative because, as I said, having just turned 65 in February, it was kind of overwhelming at first. There,
Sure.
But,
My favorite is when people call a bunch of people and then they call me and then they're like, "Wow, this is nice." Sometimes when they
That's
call
what
me,
they compare it to, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So it's a nice place to land. But whether I'm your first call or your last call, if you have questions, please reach out and we'll be here to answer those and anything.
that's Mike DeVito from My Insurance Guy.
Thank you. Good talking to you.